This is Rwanda, and fascinating things have been happening here over the last 3 decades. This small East African nation made international headlines in April of 1994 for all the wrong reasons. The Rwandan genocide, which lasted just 100 days, was one of the most brutal mass murders in history. When the bloodshed mostly ended in the summer of 1994, it is estimated that more than 500,000 Rwandans lost their lives, indicating that approximately 10% of the country's entire population perished as a result of the fighting. This enormous loss of life had severe repercussions across Rwandan society. Entire communities were obliterated, hundreds of thousands of kids were left without their parents, and the economy was in tatters. Between 1990 and 1994, Rwanda's economy declined by almost 71%. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the brutal genocide meant Rwanda, in just a few months, went from one of the richest countries in the region to one of the poorest. As these graphs show, in 1992, Rwanda had one of the highest GDP per capita in its region, but in 1994, it had one of the lowest. Despite this catastrophic event, in terms of economics at least, Rwanda managed to make significant progress in the years that followed the genocide. In the new millennia, Rwanda's growth was impressive, and this country, along with Uganda and Tanzania, began to experience strong economic growth. Now, of course, no one would argue that Rwanda became some sort of economic paradise over the past 25 years, but with GDP growth averaging a solid 8.1% per year between 1996 and 2018, the nation's economy has quite simply boomed. Now you might be asking yourself, what can explain such a transformation? Well, economies can grow due to a number of different reasons. However, one key factor that undoubtedly helped cause Rwanda's economic success is the high level of economic freedom and liberalization that the nation, until very recently, managed to maintain over this period. Although it may sound like a vague term, economic freedom fundamentally boils down to the ability of every individual in a society to control his or her own labor and property. Economic freedom has been defined by the following statement. In an economically free society, individuals are free to work, produce, consume, and invest in any way they please, with minimal government intervention. In economically free societies, governments allow labor, capital, and goods to move freely, and refrain from coercion or constraint of liberty beyond the extent necessary to protect and maintain liberty itself. Now, evidence across numerous studies and indices indicates that nations with higher levels of economic freedom tend to have healthier societies, cleaner environments, higher GDP per capita, stronger democracies, and less poverty than countries with lower levels of economic freedom. Every year, the Heritage Foundation, a think tank based in Washington, D.C., creates its own Index of Economic Freedom, which gives 176 countries an economic freedom score. Overall, scores on the index are found using an average of 12 components that all impact the level of liberalization within an economy. So, what do we find when we look at Rwanda's ranking in this index? Given all of what we've said so far, perhaps unsurprisingly, we find that Rwanda's level of economic freedom on the Heritage Index has largely skyrocketed over the last 25 years. In 1997, just a few years after the genocide, the country's economic freedom score was an abysmal 38.3 out of 100. This low of a score meant that Rwanda was almost 20 points lower than the world average for economic freedom. However, things changed rapidly, and in 2019, Rwanda reached its all-time high in economic freedom, a remarkable score of 71.1. In 2019, Rwanda was more than 10 points higher than the global average, an incredible turnaround that significantly improved the lives of millions of Rwandans, as shown by these graphs. Unfortunately for the Rwandan people, the story does not end there. Remember how we said that a country's overall economic freedom score is calculated from averaging 12 equally weighted components? Well, Rwanda's score on 3 components over the past 5 years has fallen drastically, resulting in Rwanda's overall economic freedom plummeting since 2019. The first component that has caused Rwanda's economic freedom levels to collapse is known as fiscal health. Fiscal health is the idea that governments can pay for various investments that they are making within an economy. In other words, strong fiscal health indicates that a nation is taking good care of its finances. This is not the case in Rwanda. Rwanda's fiscal health score in the 2023 index is a horrendous 11.1 out of 100, a decline of 75.6 points since 2020. Expanding deficits and an ever-increasing debt burden are shackling Rwanda's economic potential. Rwanda's poor fiscal health score might become less surprising if we consider some of the enormous projects the Rwandan government has thrown money at over the last few years. In 2019, Rwanda entered into a £40 million sponsorship deal with the English Premier League football club Arsenal. And a year later, they did the same thing with the French football club Paris Saint-Germain. Except that deal was worth about £7 million, far more modest, but still quite substantial. The government has argued that spending £47 million on football clubs will help the tourism industry. But in a country with a GDP per capita of about $822, it's probably worth spending that money somewhere else. Also, with the COVID-19 pandemic causing increased unemployment, strains on supply lines, and subsequently lowered tax revenues, government finances undoubtedly suffered as a result. Second, Rwanda's decline in trade freedom has made economic outcomes in the country significantly worse. Countries with high levels of trade liberalization enjoy minimal tariff and non-tariff barriers that affect the importing and exporting of various goods and services. High trade freedom levels are very important when it comes to a well-functioning economy because it helps consumers gain access to quality goods at cheaper prices. Countries with low levels of trade freedom spend billions of dollars taxing productive industries, which ends up making goods more expensive for consumers to purchase. In 2015, Rwanda's trade freedom score was a strong 80.8, indicating that Rwandans enjoyed the benefits of being able to move goods in and out of their country with ease. This year, Rwanda's trade freedom score was 50.0, a decline of more than 30 points. A reduced trade freedom score shows that Rwanda's government is increasingly hindering the free flow of goods and services, causing the cost of everyday goods and services to increase, and subsequently making Rwandans poorer. Finally, Rwanda's judicial effectiveness score is a significant issue. For countries to thrive, individuals need to enjoy the benefits of a well-functioning legal system that can protect their rights from the unlawful actions of others. Rwanda does not seem to be one of the places where citizens get to enjoy such a benefit, with a judicial effectiveness score of just 27.3. With a score that low, it is difficult to believe that Rwanda's government is intensely interested in improving the judiciary so that individuals and the private sector can operate effectively. Instead, it seems like Rwanda's government is focused on holding onto authoritarian power. There have been a number of worrying allegations made against Paul Kagame, the country's longtime leader. Kagame gained international fame as the man who ended the Rwandan genocide, when he led the effort to retake Kigali, the country's capital city, in the midst of the conflict. However, since that time, several reports have come out speaking negatively of the Kagame regime. A 2018 European Union report noted that there were serious civil and political rights violations happening in Rwanda, and Human Rights Watch has suggested that summary executions, enforced disappearances, unlawful arrest and detention, and torture remain all too common in Rwanda. The combined effect of worsening fiscal health, worsening trade freedom, and worsening judicial effectiveness has caused Rwanda's overall economic freedom score to collapse over the past 4 years. And in the latest iteration of the Index of Economic Freedom, Rwanda's score was 52.2, an 18.9 point slide in just 4 years. Rwanda went from the second freest economy in Africa to the 30th freest in just the last few years. The future does not look bright for the nation that many commentators once considered an economic miracle. Rwanda had experienced high growth rates and improving living standards for several years when economic freedom was flourishing, but it seems as if the winds have changed, and now Rwanda is headed in a different direction. All is not lost though. Rwanda took a turn for the worst 5 years ago, and if the right policies were introduced, they could equally make a turn in the right direction. However, as with all public policy, this change fundamentally relies on the decisions of the Rwandan government. If the government chooses to prioritize the freedom of its citizens, greater prosperity will inevitably follow. Let's hope the right choices are made very soon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to follow the IATP on Twitter at @the_IATP. Also, hit the like and subscribe button below and check out our website at www.theiatp.org.